The Kensington Ledge's hangar bay reverberated with the low hiss of pressure equalization as the shuttle from the Langley eased into its clamps. The gantry crew moved with precision, magnetic guidance arms locking the vessel in place, while indicator lights strobed green across the deck. Rook stood just beyond the safety line, helmet tucked under his arm, the faint tang of engine coolant and sterilizing mist biting the air. He kept his stance steady as the shuttle's hatch cycled open. Caro stepped out first, tall, leaner than Rook remembered, his black uniform crisp despite the long transit. Behind him, a wiry engineer lugging a compact tool case and a sharp-eyed tactical officer followed, both wearing Langley insignia. But Caro's focus locked immediately on Rook. For a moment, the sounds of the hangar dropped away, and both men were 20 years younger, standing in training fatigues on a sun-scorched parade deck, arguing over simulations and pulling double shifts just to get noticed. "Rook," Caro said, a grin slipping easily across his face. "Didn't think I'd see you out here? Not unless something went very, very wrong." Rook couldn't stop the faint curve of his own mouth. "Caro, you always did have the timing of a vulture." Caro laughed, stepping off the ramp, boots clanging against the deck plates. "Somebody's got to show up after the mess is made." He extended a hand. Rook clasped it firmly. The shake lingered a fraction too long. Memories threaded between calloused palms, shared drills, near misses, the kind of bond forged only by years in the same unforgiving system. But when they released, Rook's expression cooled, settling back into command neutrality. "Welcome aboard the Ledge," Rook said. Caro glanced around the hangar, taking in the older bulkheads, the scuffed deck paint, the lines of automated loaders and inert drones parked at the far wall. "She hasn't changed a bit. Still holding together on a shoestring budget, I see." "She's holding together," Rook said. "For now." Caro gestured idly toward the sealed inner bulkhead. "Got a meeting room somewhere that isn't freezing my ears off?" "Follow me." The small party moved off the hangar deck, boots ringing against the corridor grating as they passed through a security gate. A pair of Marines checked IDs, their eyes flicking briefly over Caro's crew before waving them through. The inner corridors were tighter than those of the Langley, bulkheads older, lighting harsher. Caro's gaze roamed as they walked, taking in every detail with that same habit he'd had as a cadet, always measuring, always assessing. Halfway down the corridor, Caro slowed. Ahead, a side junction was locked down, heavy blast doors sealed and 2 armed guards posted directly outside. They weren't the usual watch detail either. Rook saw Caro register the heavier rifles, the high-grade armor, the focused stares. Caro arched a brow, voice casual. "You always keep this many guns on standby in a survey theater?" Rook didn't break stride. "Standard precautions. Sensitive equipment in that sector." Caro glanced at him sidelong. "Sensitive? On a ship that barely gets first-pick supplies?" Rook kept his expression neutral. "We picked up something in orbit. Nothing dangerous, but command doesn't want it walked off." Caro's eyes narrowed slightly, catching the half-truth. He didn't push, not yet, but the question hung in the air between them. "Seems like you've grown fond of company doctrine since we last shared a drink." "Maybe I just like keeping my crew alive," Rook said, still walking, tone calm but final. Caro's 2 crew members followed in silence, but one of them, a sharp-faced lieutenant with a recorder slate, glanced back toward the sealed corridor as they passed, curiosity plain in her expression. Caro caught the glance but didn't comment. Instead, he fell into step beside Rook again. "Look, I'm not here to pry," Caro said after a moment. "But I know you. And I know when you're keeping something under your vest. I just hope whatever you've locked behind that door isn't going to bite you." Rook's jaw tightened slightly. "If it could, it would have already." Caro let out a low whistle, cryptic as ever. He shook his head, but there was no malice in his voice. "You used to tell me everything back before we knew better. Back before we had anything worth keeping quiet about," Rook said. Caro chuckled softly and let the subject drop. The tension didn't dissipate, but it settled into the air like a fog. Thin, persistent, unavoidable. They reached another security checkpoint, where a junior officer cleared them through to the main spine corridor leading to the upper decks. The Ledge's internal systems hummed around them, a constant undercurrent of life support cycling and power conduits vibrating faintly with the ship's heart. Caro's gaze darted to a row of armored cables running along the ceiling, hastily patched, reinforced, clearly stressed by recent events. "She's been through it," Caro said quietly. Rook didn't answer. He keyed open the door to the officer's passage and motioned Caro through. The Langley captain stepped inside, pausing just long enough to look back down the corridor toward the sealed junction with its silent guards. The sight lingered in his eyes even as he turned away. "Lead on," Caro said, voice lighter now but threaded with curiosity. "Let's see what kind of story you're willing to tell me." "You know," Caro said after a few steps, "every time I step onto one of these older hulls, I get this weird mix of nostalgia and claustrophobia." Rook glanced at him with the faintest hint of amusement. "You're used to walking through a palace now. Cruiser decks, wide corridors, polished panels. Hard to go back to a ship that feels like it was built in someone's basement." "Basement's generous," Caro replied, brushing a hand across the bulkhead as they passed. His fingers left a faint streak in the dust no maintenance crew had quite scrubbed out. "I think the last time I was in a corridor this narrow, we were running drills at OCS. What was the nickname for the training deck?" "Ratline," Rook said. Caro laughed. "That's the one. Hell of a place to teach you how to breathe in half a lungful of air while your buddy screams at you to reroute power." Rook allowed himself a small smile. "You were the one screaming, if I remember." "Only because you were convinced there was always a better way to do it," Caro shot back. "You were the stubborn one, Rook. That hasn't changed." Rook said nothing, letting the silence stretch. The sounds of their boots and the low hum of the ship's life support filled the gap. Behind them, Caro's two officers followed, their conversation low but just audible on the recycled air. "You saw that flag in the packet?" one of them murmured, voice pitched low but not quite low enough. "What flag?" the other asked. "The overlay in the operations brief. Black Tier protocols tagged on Vestan Reach itself, buried in the old charter addendum." Rook's brow furrowed, but he kept his head forward. Black Tier? He hadn't seen anything like that in the Ledge's mission stack. Either it had been hidden from him, or someone had quietly amended the documentation without telling anyone on his crew. Caro caught the faint tension in Rook's jaw. His eyes flicked sideways, measuring him. Then he glanced back toward his people. "Probably just legacy paperwork," Caro said lightly, pitching his voice back over his shoulder. "Old sectors get mislabeled all the time." "Black Tier isn't a mislabel," the first officer replied, voice quieter now. "Not unless you're dealing with classified infrastructure or—" "That's enough," Caro said. He didn't raise his tone, but the authority was there, enough to shut it down. The two specialists fell silent, though Rook could feel the weight of their words still pressing in the air. Caro's gaze lingered on Rook, a silent question in his eyes, but Rook didn't answer. Inside, though, his thoughts churned. Black Tier? Here? If it was true, then he'd been working in the dark on a world he was never supposed to fully understand. They turned a corner into a wider junction, passing another maintenance crew working on a relay panel. Sparks flared briefly as a conduit was reseated. Caro watched as they stepped aside to let the officers through, tools clinking against the deck. "Your people look stretched thin," Caro said, "like they've been putting out fires nonstop." Rook didn't answer immediately. The truth was too complicated, too bound up in things he wasn't supposed to say. "We've been running hard for months," he said finally. "Resources go where command sends them. We make do." Caro studied him in profile. "You're making do with protocols I haven't seen on a ship this size in a long time." Rook stopped walking just for a second. Caro halted with him, raising an eyebrow. The corridor behind them was quiet, Caro's team hanging back just far enough to give the two commanders a sliver of space. "You've always had a habit of asking questions," Rook said. "And you've always had a habit of dodging them," Caro replied evenly. "I don't need details, Rook, but I know when something doesn't add up. A dead colony, a ship under heavier lockdown than half the fleet, and you, walking around like you've got a live warhead tucked under your coat." Rook's eyes met his. There was no anger there, no accusation. Just an old friend looking for a crack in the armor. "I'm following orders," Rook said quietly. Caro studied him for another heartbeat, then gave a small nod. Fair enough. He didn't press, but Rook could feel the tension settle back between them, quiet but persistent. They resumed walking, the sound of their boots echoing again through the passage. "You've built yourself a reputation," Caro said after a while, his tone lighter as if to ease the weight in the air. "Reliable, unshakable. I see that hasn't changed." Rook gave a small, dry smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It's served me well so far." "Just don't let it blind you," Caro said. "Sometimes you can be so focused on what's ahead, you don't notice the floor giving way under your feet." "I'll keep that in mind." They reached the final junction leading to the meeting deck. A pair of Marines stepped aside as the group approached, giving quick nods to Rook before falling back into their posts. Caro took in the scene. Older walls, battle scars along the bulkheads, the air carrying the scent of oil and ozone. "She's seen better days," Caro murmured almost to himself. Rook didn't answer. He hit the access panel, and the door to the meeting room slid open with a hiss. The meeting room was one of the few spaces on the Kensington ledge that still carried a trace of its original finish. Polished steel surfaces dulled only by time, wall panels clean enough to reflect the low amber lighting. Rook took his seat at the head of the narrow table, Caro settling across from him with that same quiet presence that could make a room feel smaller. Between them, a hollow projector hummed to life, painting a three-dimensional model of the colony's surface above the table. The devastated grid stretched out in pale contours, blackened craters etched into its surface like scars. In the middle of it all glimmered a small wedge highlighted in blue. The intact medical and science wing Malin had identified. Rook tapped a control, zooming in on the highlighted section. This structure's readings are stable. No thermal anomalies, no collapse signatures. If any of the colony's infrastructure is still operational, it's there. Caro tilted his head and gestured to his wiry engineer, Kel, who had been quietly reviewing a portable slate. "Show them what we picked up." Kel stepped forward and set the slate on the edge of the table. The holographic projection shifted as new telemetry streamed in, overlaying Langley's higher-resolution scans onto the ledge's feed. Finer layers of data flickered across the model, faint power traces, buried conduits, and localized interference patterns the ledge's sensors hadn't been able to resolve. Malin leaned in, studying the merged display, her expression tightening with focus. "That fits with our assessment," she admitted after a moment. "Your sensors are cleaner than ours. We couldn't resolve those subsurface traces." Caro gave a small, almost apologetic smile. "Newer ship, better toys. But it's your call what we do with it." Malin straightened, clasping her hands behind her back. "Environmental integrity is questionable," she said. "There may be micro-breaches in the outer walls. We'll need full suits, but the interior should be navigable. Power readings are minimal but present. That's why I think we might get something from their equipment. Diagnostic rigs, imaging systems, maybe even data cores if they're intact." Caro's brow furrowed. "Equipment? I thought we were here to figure out what happened, not scavenge hardware." Malin met his gaze calmly. "If their systems are intact, they could hold environmental logs or operational data. It's not salvage. It's information we can't get from orbit." Caro let that settle for a beat, then nodded. "All right. And how many people do you need for this run?" "My team will handle the technical side," Malin said. "But we'll need security. 2 Marines minimum, a tech officer, myself. That's 4. Caro crossed his arms. "I'll send an engineer who knows how to strip a system without blowing it apart, and one of my own tax specialists. 6 total. That's manageable." Rook nodded slowly. 2 shuttles, staggered approach. We deploy simultaneously. Maintain visual contact at all times. If anything looks off, we pull back immediately. 2 hours on the surface, no more," Caro added. "Long enough to get in, sweep the place, and get out." "Agreed." Rook shifted his gaze to Malin. "Prep whatever portable analysis gear you think you'll need. Nothing that can't be carried back by hand." She gave a sharp nod and moved back to her terminal, already composing a list. Caro rested his elbows on the table, fingers steepled. "We'll keep our comms tethered the whole time. No dead zones. If your signal drops for more than 10 seconds, I'm pulling my people and burning off that surface." "Understood," Rook said. "Same goes for us." The room settled into a quiet rhythm as the plan took shape. Caro's engineer, a wiry man named Kel, stepped forward to confirm his role. "I'll need about 10 minutes with any active cores we find," he said. "After that, I can't promise they'll hold together." "You'll have it," Rook replied. "We're not stripping the place, we're just looking for answers." Caro's tactical specialist, a tall woman with cropped hair and the steady demeanor of someone who had seen too many boarding actions, nodded once. "I'll coordinate with your Marines. We'll move as one unit." Rook gave her a measuring look. "Fine. Get with Sergeant Hale on the ledge's side. He'll walk you through our protocols." She didn't flinch under his gaze. "Understood." Caro glanced between them, then pushed himself to his feet. "That's settled then. My people will return to the Langley to prep. Give us 90 minutes. We'll meet you at the rendezvous and head down together." Rook stood as well. "Understood. The hangar crew here will have our shuttles prepped and waiting. We'll run a final sweep before launch." Caro held his gaze for a beat longer than necessary, as though he might ask again about the sealed corridor, but he let it go. He offered his hand instead. Rook clasped it firmly, feeling the familiar grip of a man who, despite rank and time, still considered him an equal. "See you in 90, Caro said. his tone steady but threaded with something unspoken. Concern, maybe, or caution. Rook gave a brief nod. Stay sharp. Caro motioned to his two officers, and together they filed out of the room as one of the Marines outside escorted Caro and his officers back to their shuttle. The door hissed shut, leaving Rook alone with Malin and his operations staff. He turned to them, voice firm. You heard it. Get the team prepped. Suits sealed, weapons checked. Every piece of equipment logged and double-checked before we board. Yes, Commander, Malin said, already moving toward the exit. The next hour unfolded in a flurry of focused activity. In the hangar bay, crew members ran diagnostics on the Ledge's shuttle, refueling and running calibration tests on the landing thrusters. Marines checked their rifles, loaded magazines, and secured their armor plates with practiced efficiency. Malin oversaw the loading of portable scanners and containment cases, each item tagged and inventoried. The tech officer assigned to the mission moved between racks of gear, checking seals on data slates and power cells, his brow furrowed in concentration. Rook moved among them, silent but present, noting every detail with a practiced eye. The air in the bay carried the metallic tang of ozone, mingling with the faint burn of disinfectant. Somewhere overhead, a pressure valve hissed, releasing a thin mist that caught the light in a brief shimmer. He took a moment to pull Captain Lath and Bresh to one side, out of earshot of the others. Lath, Bresh, keep an eye on system chatter while we're out. There's talk this site was tagged Black Tier on old charters. I don't know why, and I don't like going in blind. If anything shifts, pull us back immediately. Lath's brow furrowed. Black Tier? That's news to me. Same here, Rook said. But Caro's people think they saw it in a buried ops file. Could be nothing. Could be something Command didn't bother to mention. Bresh folded his arms, eyes narrowing. You want us digging while you're on the ground? If you can. Quietly, Rook replied. And don't break our comms window unless it's urgent. Lath gave a sharp nod. Understood. We'll keep the line open and our ears sharper than usual. Rook clasped Lath's shoulder once, then turned back toward the shuttle, the weight of the classified tag still sitting heavy in his mind. Team 1 status? Rook asked, stepping up to Sergeant Hale as the Marines ran a final systems check on their suits. Sealed and ready, sir, Hale replied, voice steady. Weapons green, comms verified. Malin. Rook turned. Scanners prepped. Portable cores synced. We'll be ready to board on your word. Rook gave a single nod. Stand by. Time stretched. The minutes marked by the rhythmic hiss of air seals and the thrum of the Ledge's engines beneath their feet. Caro had already sent confirmation over a secure channel from the Langley. His engineer and tactical officer were prepping aboard his own shuttle, and they would launch on his word. See you planetside, the message had ended. Rook read it, then keyed the hangar intercom. Team 1, board the shuttle. Launch in 5. The Marines and Malin filed up the ramp in practiced formation, their suits gleaming under the bay lights. The tech officer carried the final crate, locking it into the cargo cradle before sealing the hatch. Rook lingered for one last glance at the hangar crew, then followed, the boarding ramp rising behind him with a hiss. Shuttle 1, you are cleared for departure, came the comm officer's voice over the channel. Understood, Rook replied. The shuttle detached smoothly, engines flaring briefly as it pushed away from the Ledge's gravity locks. The ship shrank behind them, a long silhouette against the fractured glow of Vestan reach below. Inside, Rook strapped himself into a jump seat beside Hale, the hum of the engines a steady backdrop. Malin secured her slate against her knee, scrolling through checklists one last time. Ahead, the Langley's shuttle appeared as a distant glint of reflected light, its transponder signal resolving on the nav board. Rook's pilot adjusted course, thrusters firing in gentle bursts as the gap between them began to close. Through the comm link came a brief burst of chatter, Langley's shuttle reporting all systems green and on vector. Rook studied the nav screen as the second craft came into visual range. The Langley shuttle was sleeker than the Ledge's, its hull etched with the clean lines of a newer generation. Through the forward viewport, Rook caught movement in the other shuttle's cabin. Caro seated near the forward bulkhead, helmet resting on his knees, leaning in to speak with his engineer, Kel. Their tactical specialist strapped in opposite them, running her own pre-drop checks. Caro looked up as if sensing the gaze. For a moment across the void, the two men locked eyes through armored glass and years of history. Caro lifted a hand in a brief, almost casual salute before turning back to confer with his team. Rook allowed himself a faint exhale. Whatever lay waiting on that silent planet below, at least he wouldn't be facing it alone. Back aboard the Ledge, as the hangar crew monitored launch telemetry, A soft alert chimed on one of the internal status boards. A technician frowned, leaning closer. The vibration signature from the containment room had shifted. Barely. Almost imperceptible, but enough to register. A second technician looked over his shoulder, eyebrows drawing together. "Could be nothing," she said quietly. "Keep eyes on it," the first murmured, tapping in a silent log entry. They shared a glance but said nothing more, not yet willing to break into the secure channel to Rook mid-mission. Instead, they returned their attention to the readings, the faint vibration pulsing like a heartbeat behind sealed doors.